Randell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, what brings you to ESA 2016?
Well, I'm excited about storage. I think storage has a lot of value to offer power grids. Power grids have had over 140 years or so without appreciable storage, and so it's an exciting time to look at storage and the benefits to power grids.
You work for Alevo Analytics.
Yes.
What do you do?
Well, I apply methods, techniques that have been used for many years in valuing assets, valuing power assets, power plants, transmission lines, and we use high-performance computing, and we combine high-performance computing with methods and calculation methods to then value what storage can provide to a grid. There's a whole new, if you will, viewpoint of valuing how, if you can charge and discharge storage in a distributed format throughout the power grids, to where you can rethink how power grids are operated, how you value them, how you maintain them, how you bring security to the power grid so we can have stable, good supply of electricity to cities, towns, and homes.
What is the value of knowing the value?
The value of knowing the value is simply this. Are we over-designing the grids? If we're over the history of the power sector, the grid supply chain for electricity is the fastest supply chain on Earth. It travels at near the speed of light. There's no other supply chain that travels at that speed, comparatively. And this supply chain has had no appreciable storage over the last 150 years or so. So all other supply chains have storage. If you take water, if you take food, if you take natural gas, if you take oil, there's all been appreciable levels of storage in those supply chains, as much as 10% if you go through the supply chain of the storage. With electricity, we're less than 1% of storage of electricity currently in the current supply chains. Now, if you add storage, you can rethink about how the grids are designed. Do we need as many transmission lines? Do we need as many large power plants? The answer is in the numbers, it's in the facts, it's in the figures, but what storage can provide is more of distributed systems. So we don't need as many large station assets such as transmission lines, such as generators. There's cases to defer these systems.
So how receptive are the utilities to the information that you put in front of them?
Utilities are generally receptive. Utilities have had a long history of integrating a whole variety of technologies to utilities. They have methods that they're used to. They have regulators that they need to respond to. They have agreed often terms with regulators in the sense of how to value something. How do they show that something is least cost? So they have formulas, they have ways to approach that. So as long as we work within the realm of reasonableness, as long as we work within the realm of traditional science, traditional mathematics in applying these valuation methods in economics, in power engineering, and we show them and we demonstrate with common methods that are used, while we have to enhance them some because storage can do things that other traditional assets can't do, we have to show them how to enhance. And then once we do that in a fair framework, we generally are received quite well.
Is it the case that as more storage comes online, it's more valuable?
It can be. That's an interesting question. I thank you for that question. There are elements, we'll go to, that opens up the concepts in economics of diminishing returns. And there are elements of storage that as you add more storage, there can be diminishing returns. But it turns out that as you add more distributed storage, while some value streams, let's say there's 25 value streams that storage bring to a power grid, maybe 3 of those value streams start to diminish as the storage gets more and more penetration. But it turns out that the opposite is true as you add more and more storage for deferring expensive peaking power plants and deferring expensive transmission lines, then the value, you don't see it diminishing. You see it as you increase storage, you get more and more of that value out of the system.
So what are the next steps?
This technology is fairly recent. You know, we've just gone through deregulated markets in the last 10 to 15 years. Deregulated power markets, we went from vertical entities to deregulated entities like utilities. Then we saw the world introduce wind turbine technology successfully, starting out primarily in Europe and expanding around the world. Now the world has introduced solar technology, starting out with a lot of distributed technology and some large-scale solar. And then the world went through a phase of demand response and energy efficiency. And this has all happened in the last 15 years. So to cap it all off, to make it all work, to get all the benefits from all these programs, storage can now play the role. We are a technology, distributed storage is fairly recent technology. So the next steps is one, just simple education. Get folks comfortable, regulators, policymakers, across the world. We work to make people comfortable with, to understand where the values are at, and then we have to work to, then how do you monetize those values? How do you make it so that the storage, when it comes in, it can provide the consumer benefit, which it does, but then have a fair return for providing that consumer benefit?
It's often said that for every 1 megawatt of storage on the grid, it replaces 3 megawatts of conventional energy supply. What's your take on that?
My take is, while that is a generalization, I like to approach the problem slightly different. I like to approach the problem of each grid has unique characteristics. It has some short-term characteristics as we wake up in the morning and we turn on lights and we turn on toasters and things like that. And then during the day when we go into office complexes or into our industrials, into our factories. And then at night when we come home and we turn our heaters on or air conditioners up, and then we cook our dinners, and we have tea time and things like that. The way I'd like to look at it is to say, let's, on each and every grid has some unique characteristics. It's best to just look. These characteristics can be mathematically modeled, can be quantified with economics, with power engineering, with mathematical analysis. We can actually quantify what the grid wants. So while, yes, storage does have that value in terms of its value, but in some grids it might be more, some grids it might be less, some applications more, some applications less. Yeah.
What does the future hold?
I think we're at an exciting time because we now are at a point in time where with distributed solar and with distributed storage, we can now crack the dependence on fossil fuel and we'll reduce it. And with that, we can have a different world around us because now you don't necessarily need to bottle up wealth in cargo ships of gas or cargo inventories of oil. Now you can distribute, and as we reduce the cost of this electricity, the 600 million Africans that don't have electricity right now, we are now getting to an approach where we can get to the point where we might be able to provide systems to the Africans and increase their dignity, increase their health, reduce disease, because that's proven worldwide. Cheap, clean electricity is good for people, it's good for economy, it's just good all around.
Randell, that was fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.